Western Sydney favorite Tai Tuivasa went to war with Cyril Gane this past weekend, losing via TKO in the third round. But it could have all been so different for Bam Bam after almost finishing his opponent with a huge left in the second to add to his mammoth collection of epic knockouts. But it wasn't meant to be. Today, we're discussing and ranking Tuivasa's top finishes throughout his career so far. Don't go anywhere. First up, at number 8, it's Brandon Susili. Stick around. In just his 5th professional fight, fans got a look at what Tai Tuivasa was all about as he demolished his opponent at AFC 16 in the very first round, which will become a recurring theme. The dangerous Western Sydney man wasted no time in getting to work, taking just 21 seconds from the first bell to KO. Tuivasa landed a massive right to back Susili up against the cage, before following that up with an elbow from hell, knocking his opponent clean out. The win actually crowned him the AFC heavyweight champion, and the way in which he did it would have been good enough to win any championship in all fairness. A truly terrifying show of power and a sign of things to come for the big Aussie. What did you guys make of Tai's massive win over Susili? Let us know below. Rashad Coulter is number 7. Tai took on Coulter back in November 2017 and his debut fight in the UFC, finishing his opponent with an epic flying knee. The finish was set up by a beautiful leg kick which sat Coulter down, and the big Aussie smelled blood. As Coulter rose to his feet, Tai landed a perfect flying knee, seemingly out of nowhere, knocking his opponent out cold before attempting to land another huge right hand, which wasn't necessary in the end, as the referee smothered Coulter to save him from any more punishment. The knockout was almost as good as the dancing celebration. What did you guys make of this one? In at 6, we have Cyril Asker next. Stay with us. Tai showed just how good his stamina was, and Asker showed just how tough he was in equal measure during this fight at UFC 211 back in 2018. In the very first round, Tuivasa poured it on his opponent, who was absolutely no match for Bam Bam. Asker should be credited for staying on his feet as long as he did, as Tai ripped into his head as well as his body. He then began to mix in some elbows, and it was a huge right elbow which actually ended Asker's evening. After our man Tai landed the monster elbow on his opponent, he tried to escape along the cage, but simply fell to the ground after succumbing to the pressure. He really should be commended for staying in there as long as he did with one of the heaviest hitters in the entire promotion. So bravo, Cyril. Stefan Struve is in at number 5. Stick around. Tai's first fight after a 3-fight skid saw him face off against Dutch legend Stefan Struve. Tuivasa would eventually end up retiring the 7-footer in one of the first events of the COVID period. The lack of fans simply added to the wins factor, as everyone could hear the heavy impact of Tuivasa shots. Yet another first-round finish saw Tai pile on Struve against the fence as he displayed some excellent stamina, landing a huge uppercut which sent Struve straight to the canvas. Tuivasa followed him to the ground, but, like so many of his other first-round finishes, it was unnecessary. The referee saved Struve from any further punishment to get our man back on track. What did you guys make of the Struve KO? At 4, we're talking Harry Hunsucker. 18 months before Tai's brother-in-law Tyson Pedro got his hands on Hunsucker, Tuivasa got to grips with the Kentucky man to devastating effect. And, in just his 14th professional fight, Tai delivered his 10th first-round finish, quite incredibly. The writing was on the wall for Hunsucker almost from the start, as Tuivasa started like a speeding bullet to lay it on his opponent. After buttering Harry up with some solid leg kicks, the Aussie went to work upstairs, landing a huge right which sent Hunsucker to the canvas. He then landed some pretty heavy shots on the ground, but at one point, it seemed as though the big American had survived. However, Tai went in again with some nasty ground and pound before Herb Dean decided he had seen enough. What did you guys make of this knockout win for our man from Western Sydney? Let us know below. The Greg Hardy KO is 3rd on the list. Stay with us. Considering who he was up against and how the fight played out, this was one of the most popular KOs of the entire calendar year of 2021. Greg Hardy is universally disliked by most people, given his history of domestic abuse and not being a very nice person in general, and as Tai looked as though he himself was about to be knocked out shortly before his big win, this just made the KO even better. Yet again, Tai disposed of his opponent in the very first round, but not before a huge scare. Former NFL player Hardy landed a huge combination to wobble the Aussie, but that's where Bam Bam is at his most dangerous. Hardy smelled blood and piled in on Tai, but the Aussie landed a massive counter left hand, sending the American directly to the canvas, without passing go nor collecting $200. Good night, Greg. Augusto Sakai is in at number 2. Don't go anywhere. With a serious upturn in form, having won 3 in a row before taking on Sakai at UFC 269 back in December 2021, Tuivasa was full of confidence, and rightly so. Somewhat surprisingly, Sakai survived into the second round, which so many of his opponents never get the privilege of. But that only served to anger the heavy-hitting Aussie. After landing a big left hook to back Sakai up, Tuivasa began his onslaught with the Brazilian up against the cage. Landing a couple of big bombs in a row, Sakai quickly ended up on the floor out cold, with his left leg awkwardly trapped behind him as he fell down. The win provided Tai with his 13th knockout in 14 wins. Quite an incredible record. What did you guys make of this one? And at number 1, we're talking Derek Lewis next. Stay tuned. Lewis is universally recognized as one of the most terrifying knockout artists in the history of the UFC, and, as such, sits at the very top of the most knockouts of all time list in the promotion. And, similar to Hardy, Tai nearly succumbed to Lewis' skills, but decided UFC 271 was not going down in the books with an L next to his name. Lewis had hurt Tai with a big knee followed up by an uppercut, but Tai composed himself to fire back, landing a couple of big punches and elbows himself. Being cheered on by the crowd, Tai took encouragement and hurt Lewis badly with a massive right hand. With the pair up against the fence, Tuivasa landed a mammoth elbow right to the face of Derek, who crumpled, falling to the ground in what seemed like slow motion, and the fight was over for Tai's 5th win and knockout in a row. Who's your favorite knockout artist in UFC history? And finally, we're discussing his latest outing against Cyril Gane. Stay with us. Tuivasa and Gane faced off at this weekend's UFC Paris event, which was incidentally the first UFC show ever in France. The first round started off somewhat tepidly, with both men feeling each other out and Tai sticking to his gameplay of not rushing in. He knew that Gane possessed the tools to be able to turn a brawl to his advantage, so he kept his composure well, but the big Frenchman was having some success with body kicks. Into the second round, and Tai began to open up a little, and at one point, it looked as though he had shocked the home crowd, landing a huge left to the chin of Gane, who fell down against the cage. Tai piled in looking for the finish, but somehow, Gane escaped to bring the fight to Tuivasa, and bring the fight he did. He decided attack was the best form of defense, and visibly hurt Tai with a huge body kick, but both men managed to just survive the round. The third round began in much the same vein as the second had finished, with both men bringing it. Gane knew he had the most success with body kicks, so he kept up his barrage, which Tai didn't really have an answer for. As Tai decided to go on the offensive, he went after Gane, but the Frenchman dodged one of his attacks, landing a big left of his own, which was ultimately curtains for Tai. The referee had seen enough and saved him from any further punishment. As usual, thanks for dropping in on us today, and remember to tune in again next time when we'll be discussing all sorts of other cool bits and pieces. And why not do us a solid by liking and sharing today's video, while also subscribing to our channel. Bye guys!